with words, with debates. They called it the snake's oven. V'timu, they turned the oven into something impure. Tana, we learned, Ba'oisei ayoim heishiv Rabbi Eliezer kol tshuvas sheba'olam v'loi kiblu emenu. On that day, Rabbi Eliezer tried to prove every proof in the world that the oven was pure. They did not accept it. They decided that the oven was tamei. The oven was impure. Rabbi Eliezer, who we now know as a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in fact, he's one of the two people who carried the coffin out of Jerusalem to meet Vespasian, to have him meet Vespasian, Aspasianus. Rabbi Eliezer says it's pure. The rest of the sages say it's impure. This is Yavna. What happened? What type of oven was this? The Gemara says, Tanur Shalachanoi. What happened here? What's the issue? So the issue is, Rashi discusses this, Tosfos discusses it, we have it in Maseches Brachos. The issue is, so here you have a classic oven, a tanur, from that time. This is an oven that's known as a tanur of cheres. It's made of earthenware. It's a clay oven. Clay. What is it made of? Like all clay cheres earthenware, you take earth, you mix it with water, you put in some straw, you have a potter who molds it, and you bake it in the furnace, or you bake it in the sun. That's how they made bowls, and plates, and cups, and barrels. And if you ever learn Mishnayos and Gemara, clay cheres occupies a major, important role in halacha, because earthenware vessels, as the pasuk says in Shmini, are susceptible to tumah. If a source of impurity falls into the space and the cavity of an earthenware vessel, let's say a barrel or a cup or a bowl, it's tamei. If there's a dead corpse in a house, the clay cheres is tamei. If a sheret, say a dead weasel, is suspended into the cavity of the clay cheres into the bowl, it becomes tamei. And clay cheres, unlike metal vessels, gold, silver, iron, metal, unlike, you cannot put it into the mikveh to purify it. It's too porous, as the pasuk says, tanur v'chirayim yusatz. You have to break it. You have to. What happened to this oven? You had this cylindrical oven, and it's been smashed. It's been smashed. But it wasn't just smashed into pieces without symmetry. Every part of the oven, it wasn't just smashed randomly into shards. It was precisely cut into parallel cylindrical slabs. As Chazal say anyway, chot choy chulyos. So you had now parts of the oven, you see here, but each one on its own is nothing. What did they do? They put it back together, but they connected it through choil. They put sand. Bein chulya lechulya, between each part, between each cylindrical slab of the oven, they put sand, and that's how they connected the oven. This was the oven called the snake-like oven. One reason why it was called a snake-like oven, it almost looks like the snake. Every layer of it was like a snake surrounding it. So there wasn't one cohesive oven. This was an oven that was brought together from sand. Now, sand is not mekabel tumah. If you take sand and you turn it into a vessel, you don't bake it, it's called klei adama. It's not mekabel tumah, it's not susceptible to tumah. It's like stone, it's like vessels they made out of dung, klei avonim, klei glolim, klei adama. So the question is, what's the status of this oven? The oven was broken, it became pure, but now it was put back together with sand connecting the slabs, the layers of the oven. Rabbi Eliezer said, this is no vessel. This is pure, this remains pure. It looks like an oven, it functions like an oven. You know it's fake, look at it. It's just sand in between. You take out the sand, there's no oven here. Sand is not mekabel tumah, this is a broken oven. Artificially you put it together. The Chachamim said, sorry, this is klei cheres, this is an earthenware vessel. It's true, the sand connects it in between, but the sand connects the earthenware pieces, and therefore it is an oven. It becomes impure. Now, if this would have been a theoretical debate, no. The problem is a dead sheretz fell into it. No. They came to ask Rabbi Eliezer. He said, no problem. This is a broken oven. So later they wanted to bake bread. It was bread of truma. It was sacred bread. Oy gewalt. They had all this holy bread baked in this oven. According to Rabbi Eliezer, it was all good. According to the other sages, you couldn't eat any of it. It's all tummy, it's all impure, because this tanner was a tummy dikatanner. This is what happened. This we did. Let's see, oven 2. This we also did. Okay, there the guy made a snake. Yishakayach. Okay. I guess this is the way somebody else decided the picture should be. You could see this oven, a big oven. It's connected by sand. Layers of sand connect each row of the oven. This is the Tanur Shel Achnoi, I guess another image, even though I think the earlier image sounds more like it. What happens now? There's a huge debate. This is a picture from 1870. I couldn't get a picture from 110 CE. It wasn't available even on Google, but I got from 1870. Okay? A huge debate breaks out. Here's another one. Also 1870. You get the point. What happens? Let's see. You would think he doesn't want. Amar lahem, the second paragraph. Amar lahem, Rabbi Eliezer says to his friends, Im halacha kamoisi, chruv ze yoichiach. If the law follows me, let this carob tree, charuv is boxer, a carob tree. Right near the yeshiva, they had a carob tree. Let this carob tree demonstrate that I'm right. Nekar chruv mimkoimoy meya ama v'amri lo arba meyasama. The carob tree uprooted itself from its own place, and it moved away 100 cubits, which would be between 150 and 200 feet. Others say 400 cubits, which would be approximately 650 or 800, between almost 800 feet. Amru loy, you would think they would be like, wow, OMG. We're not starting up with this man. The oven is pure. Amru loy, they say, ein meviyin raya min hachruv. No, we don't bring proofs from carob trees to ascertain the halacha of ovens. Chazav amalem, he says to them, if the law is like me, let the aqueduct of water, let the stream, the canal of water prove it. Chazru amas hamayim la'achoreihem. So what happens is, the aqueduct of water, there's a canal of water, a stream of water, it's flowing in a certain direction, it starts flowing backwards in the opposite direction. You would think at this point, they would be impressed. We don't bring proofs from the water aqueduct. Chazav Amalem, Rabbi Eliezer says to them, if the halacha is like me, let the walls of the Beis Medrash prove it. Hitu koisle Beis HaMedrash lipoil. The walls of the Beis Medrash began to cave in on them. They began to tilt as they're sitting. Now, what would you do at such a poor moment? After the carob tree is gone, the water aqueduct is going in the wrong direction, and now the walls are starting to fall. What would anybody here do? Huh? 911, chavedim, what? Misaskim, shoymrim, mizamrim, run home. Hatzalah. You would run home, right? Gar behem Rabbi Yeshua. Yeshua was a friend of Rabbi Eliezer. Remember, he took out the coffin with him. They were buddies, they were colleagues. Rabbi Yeshua started to talk to the walls. That's the expression, talk to the walls. He started to scream at the walls. You don't talk to the walls, you scream at them. Amar lehem, and he says to the walls, Im talmidei chachamim menatzchim zeh b'zeh b'halacha, atem ma tivchem. Talmidei chachamim, Torah scholars, are debating each other in Jewish law. Why are you mixing in? What are you getting involved for walls? Lo naflu mipnei kvodesh Rabbi Yeshua, v'lo zakvu mipnei kvodesh Rabbi Eliezer, v'adayan motin v'oimden. The walls did not fall down completely in the honor of Rabbi Yeshua. They did not go back and stand erect for the glory of Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara adds 3 words, and they're still tilted. It's a very interesting comment. When was Gemara written? The Gemara, this happens in the 1st century after the Common Era. The Churban was in the year 70. This happens a few decades after, maybe the beginning of the 2nd century after the Common Era. This is the generation of the Tanoim after the Churban. You had Rabbi Gamliel, you had Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, you had Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer's student, of course, was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Eliezer's prime student. Rabbi Yeshua. This is all after the Churban. The Gemara was written a few centuries later. The Gemara was completed in the 5th century after the Common Era. So what's V'adayin Matin V'oimdin? The walls in Yavna are still tilted, till today. You would think at this point, somebody would calm down the situation and say, Chevra, it's time for dinner. Chazav v'amalahem. Rabbi Yeshua said, Rabbi Eliezer says, Im halacha kamoisi, if the halacha is like me, you know what? Min hashamayim yechichu. Let heaven prove it. Yotzes baskel v'amra. A voice from heaven comes out and says, Malachem eitzer Rabbi Eliezer sha'alacha kamoisi b'chol b'yom. What are you doing arguing with Rabbi Eliezer when we all know that the halacha is like him always, everywhere? What are you arguing with him? Of course the oven is pure. Amad Rabbi Yeshua Raglov. You would think the carob tree didn't convince them. The water stream didn't convince them. The walls didn't convince them, but maybe God could convince them, no? It's a baskel. Maybe the Rebbeinu Shalom has some say, no? Not so pashut. Amad Rabbi Yeshua Raglov. Rabbi Yeshua stood up on his feet. Till now he was sitting. This at least managed to get him up. You see, nobody got too excited. At this point he gets up. V'yamar, and he says, there's a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim Perek Lamed, Parshas Nitzavim. Loi ba shamayim hi. Moshe Rabbeinu says Torah is not in heaven. My loi ba shamayim hi. What does it mean it's not in heaven? What does it mean it's not in heaven? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah shekvar nitna Torah me'ar Sinai ein anu mashgichin bebaskel shekvar kosafta bar Sinai b'Torah achere rabim lahatos. Once you gave the Torah from Mount Sinai, a voice that comes from heaven will not replace Torah. In the Torah it says in Parshas Mishpatim, follow the majority when there's a debate. There's a debate here between the sages of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Eliezer is a minority, one voice. He says it's pure. The majority says it's impure. You told us, Achrei Rabim Lahatos, a voice from heaven can't replace Torah. Loi Bashamayim, it's not in heaven anymore. The jurisdiction is on earth. The majority says the oven is impure. Rabbi Yeshua rejects the heavenly voice and says the oven is impure. The Gemara wants to make sure we get the story. So the Gemara says, Ashkechei Reb Nosson le'Eliyahu. Reb Nosson met Eliyahu Hanavi. He met Elijah the prophet. Amar loi, he asked him, My ovid kutshabrichu ba'hishait. What was Hashem doing at that moment when Rabbi Yeshua rejected the heavenly voice? Amar loi, Eliyahu Hanavi told Reb Nosson, Hashem was laughing, smiling, quelling, and stating, my children have triumphed over me. My children have defeated me. Nitzchuni from the word nitzachain, netzach. They have won. They have been victorious over me. Nitzchuni bonai, nitzchuni bonai. That's the end, at least, of this part of the story. Now I want to ask you a question. Okay, they're not impressed by the miracles, fine. But the baskel, who made that baskel? Did they think it was some Disney World production? No, it was a baskel from heaven. In other words, Hashem said an opinion. So I don't understand. Isn't all of halacha, isn't all of law to ascertain what the will of Hashem is? So you're arguing now with a heavenly voice. Hashem says, this is the law, and you're like, what do you know about the law? What does this mean? How do we understand this? So you could say, heaven can't intervene, but I don't understand. Why can't heaven intervene? Because Kvar Nitna Torah Bar Sinai, Torah is decided here. So why does heaven say halacha k'moisai? Halacha k'moisai b'chol mokum. The halacha is like him. The halacha is not like him. So Hashem thinks the halacha is like him. We decided the halacha is not like him. So now there's an argument. Very hard to understand. Some commentators say halacha k'moisai b'chol mokum. Not necessarily here. The Sefer HaChinuch Mitzvah Tov Tzadik Vav says something fascinating. He says that this is how the system of Torah works. Just to give a simple example to understand the Sefer HaChinuch. If you're a doctor in a hospital and there's a debate about a certain patient, and all of the doctors, they take it to a vote, and all the doctors feel you shouldn't do a procedure, and you're alone and you feel you should do a procedure, and you know you're right, but you may respect the fact that everybody follows the majority because you know that in the future the one opinion may be wrong and this is the best system. So the Sefer HaChinuch says, maybe the halacha here was like Rabbi Eliezer, but in every single situation you're going to have one person arguing it. Maybe he's right. The best system is Achrei Rabim Lahatos, which in most cases is going to be right. That's the Sefer HaChinuch's perspective. Reb Nissim Goyen and the Ben Ish Chai give another perspective and a very fascinating one. And they say this was exactly the point. Throughout history, people will come and they might make miracles. You might even hear voices from heaven. You have to know that you have a precedent for this. In Sefer Dvarim Parshas Rei, Moshe Rabbeinu says there may be a prophet who may do miracles. And then the prophet will go tell you to go engage in idolatry. You shouldn't listen to him. Why? He's making miracles. So the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah explains in chapter 8 and chapter 9 and chapter 10, famous Rambam, that the basis of the authenticity of Torah is Ma'amad Har Sinai. And Ma'amad Har Sinai, every Jew was there. When a prophet comes and makes miracles, the reason we listen to a prophet is not because we know for sure the prophet is saying truth. The Rambam says sometimes not. But because Moshe Rabbeinu said that if he has this criteria, you should listen to him. Why do we believe Moshe Rabbeinu? Because Ma'amad Har Sinai, Eineinu Ro V'lo Zar, every single Jew saw the revelation there. If the prophet is coming to undermine what happened at Ma'amad Har Sinai, then he lost his whole authority. So the same is true here. He was giving them a precedent. Jewish history is going to be long. There's going to be many opinions. Even in their generation, there was somebody a few years before who came and supposedly did a lot of miracles, and he changed the Jewish religion. He says he hears voices, and what if he does hear voices? And carob trees move, and streams of water move, and walls fall. Ein mashgichim bebaskel. This was the precedent. I could say halacha k'maisai, but Ma'amad Har Sinai remains the truth, the barometer of what is true and what is not true. And in Ma'amad Har Sinai, when Moshe was appointed, he gave them the Torah, and he told them the pasuk, Loi bar shamayim hi. There's a mechanism of how to determine what halacha says in a particular issue where there is a debate. Of course, you have to have it debated by the sages of Sanhedrin, who have the criteria of absolute mastery and adherence to Torah and fear of heaven. And when there is such a debate, achri rabim lahatos, you follow the majority, and that is exactly what the Creator of the world wanted. And all the miracles cannot and should not change that, even not a baskel, even not a voice. And this is when they ascertained it, and it secured the integrity of Yiddishkeit and halacha until this very day. The question I want to raise today is, what are these three miracles? A carob tree moving, an aqueduct of water streaming the wrong direction, walls falling. What is the meaning of that? Is it just Rabbi Eliezer is like, we're going to take out all the tricks from the bag? What is the meaning of this? So you read it, it's interesting. Well, why? Furthermore, the Shita Mekubetzes quotes Rabbeinu Hananel that this story was a dream. It didn't happen in physical reality. It was a dream. The Shita Mekubetzes quotes Rabbeinu Hananel. Now you have to even understand that means the dream is truly significant. What is the dream trying to convey? Not everybody agrees. Some people say this wasn't a dream. This is exactly how it happened in the physical world. But either this interpretation or another interpretation, what is the meaning of this? If you look in the Koil Eliyahu, the Vilna Gaon says something fascinating, and he says, success in Torah comes with three qualities. Quality number one, histapkus b'muat, anova, and dveikus b'limud. The first quality for success in learning is, I cannot be immersed and indulgent in materialism. Just doesn't go together. You have to fine-tune your mind and your heart to the wisdom of Torah. If I am a glutton, I become more crude. I desensitize my body, my soul, my brain to Torah wisdom. The second thing is humility. If I have a vestige of arrogance, narcissism, Torah won't work. The basis of Torah is humility. Openness to truth, infinity. The third quality is openness to debate, another opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says, in all three, I have excelled. First of all, the carob tree. The Gemara says about Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, the whole world gets sustained by him, and he eats, he's fine with a kav charuvin mishabas l'shabas, with a little volume of carobs. You ever ate carobs, Chavra Boxer? It's not exactly the epitome of indulgence, Emes. You didn't ask your wife tonight to prepare boxer for after Tisha B'Av. Yeah, for your daughter's wedding, you don't ask the caterer a Viennese table from a carob tree. It's good for Reb Shimon ben Yochai in the cave for 13 years, a carob tree. That was his point. Rabbi Eliezer was a master of a person who was completely refined. Number two, Mayim, the Gemara says, water always searches for the lowest surface. Ein Mayim el Torah, humility. Number three, I live in the Beis HaMedrash, the place of different opinions, where things become clear through different opinions. Rabbi Eliezer says, I have mastered all these three things par excellence. That was the symbol of these three elements. You can accept my opinion. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer power of Torah was unparalleled, unprecedented on all three levels. And still they said, we get it. But the majority disagrees, Rabbi Eliezer. The Maharal of Prague puts it a little differently, and he says this success in Torah happens through three things. The first is tradition. The second is clarity of thought. And the third is talking to people. The chruv, the carob tree, the Gemara says in Tainus, to produce fruit sometimes takes 70 years. That means you have to go from generation to generation. It represents the power of tradition. Water, ein mayim el Torah, represents clarity, crystal clear, refined thought. And the walls of the Beis HaMedrash are again the place of conversation and debate. I excelled in all three, the Maharal of Prague says. There's other commentators. But today, let's suggest another dimension, or another two dimensions. And I want to mention a colleague of mine, Rabbi David Foreman, from the Five Towns Alpha Beta, who gave a splendid series of lectures on this, which I'm using here as well. Perhaps there is something much more profound going on right here. These three signs are not just random, they're extremely meaningful. We spoke about this oven. This oven the Gemara describes as chulyos. They put choil, sand, between chulya and chulya. Chulya is the slab, the layer of an oven, but really the word chulya in Hebrew means something else. What does it mean? It means vertebrae. Vertebrae. Why are they calling it chulya? And the answer is, look at the spine of a person. The chut hashedra of a person is a spine. And as Chazal say, it's made up of the chulyos. Chulyos are the vertebrae. In fact, the 18 brachas of Shemona Esrei, Chazal say, are because of the Yud Ches chulyos, the 18 vertebrae in the person. This oven was not any more cohesive. It was vertebrae, literally vertebrae, and it got shattered, it got broken. Imagine a skeleton, and you're looking at a vertebrae that's shattered, and now you got to put it back together. So you take sand, and you put it in between the vertebrae, chulya lechulya. That's exactly the words that Chazal used to describe this Tanur Achnoi in Gemara Brachas, which the Rishonim, Rashi, Tosfos bring right here in this sugya. Rebbe Lezer says, you did nothing. It's a shattered oven. It's pure. It's broken. It's pure. It's nothing. It's not an oven. Maybe quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. It's not a duck. Looks like an oven, bakes like an oven. It's not an oven. It's broken. You give a kick to the sand, it's all over. Chachamim say it's an oven. In English, it doesn't work, but the word choil and chulya, of course, are connected, right? Choil means sand. Choil is ches vav lamed, connected to the word chulya, which is vertebrae. Sand is a grain of sand. A grain of sand, if somebody takes a vertebrae, chas v'shalom, shatters it and grinds it into little powder, you have like grains of vertebrae. It's like grains of sand. Choil is a tiny grain of sand. Is called choil. V'samti ezaracha kechoil hayam. All the sand together on the beach. One grain of sand on its own is not a lot. But choil hayam, you bring together all the sand, all the grains of sand together on the yam, it's a lot. And here they take the sand, the choil, the grains of sand, and they connect the vertebrae of the ovens with it. So tiny grains of some crushed substance becomes choil. It's like if you could crush those vertebrae and turn it into choil, use that fine powder to somehow put it all back together again. That's the story. Now, is it a coincidence that this oven ignited such debate? You might say, yeah, this oven had the mazel that it became a huge machlokes. And by the way, at the end of this, Rabbi Eliezer gets excommunicated. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with them. He does not acquiesce. He does not submit. He does not surrender. And the greatest of the sages, Rabbi Eliezer, who Rabbi Yeshua kissed the stone on which he sat in Yavna, and he said, this stone is basically Har Sinai. Rabbi Eliezer sat on it. This is the place where Torah was given. Rabbi Eliezer didn't submit at the end. Is it just a coincidence that there was an oven and they baked holy food and they had to burn the food and a huge debate ignited, or there's maybe more? to the story. Where did this debate happen? Yavne. Yavne is just a few kilometers from the ocean. You could go to Yavne today and you could see it. I was in Yavne. You could stand on the little hill in Yavne. Archaeologists say that was the place where the Beis Medrash, with the yeshiva of Reb Gamliel, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, of Rebbe Eliezer stood. That place where the Sanhedrin came back together. And if you look from the top of that hill and you gaze towards the south, coming towards you, what do you see? Anybody here was Yavne and Yavne? And the answer is, you will see sand everywhere. You will see choil, just, they even call it choil. Cholot Yavne, the sands of Yavne. You have dunes of earth, of sand, stretching down all the way down from Ashkelon all the way up to Yavne. Kilometers after kilometers, miles of sand dunes. That's physically. But let's now take this one step further. What do we say, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Nisan HaToikef, if you remember? Adam yisoidei me'afar, v'soifoi la'afar. Mashul, you remember? Kecheres hanishbar. Adam originates in earth. Adam ends in earth. Afar ata el afar tashuv. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam afar min ha'adama. But man is not just earth. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. Vayi adam l'nefesh chaya. It's earth that came to life. It's earth that was baked in the fire of a soul of divine energy. Mashul kecheres hanishbar. Person is often compared to cheres, to shards of an earthenware vessel. That's individual Adam. What about the collective body of Adam? The first Adam included all the souls. Isn't the story of the oven not just a story of an oven? It's a story of a people. If the chulya, the vertebrae, if each cylindrical slab of the oven is a vertebrae, one after another, after another, after another, you have the spine, you have the skeleton, you have the binyan, the roiv binyan, the shedra, the chut shedra of the human being and of Knesset Yisrael, and it's filled with warmth and fire and life and heat. It has a soul, and then one day, the oven gets shattered. Kecheres hanishbar. It gets broken. It's devastated. It doesn't seem that there's anything left from it. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who knows that the end is near, comes to Vespasian and he says, Tainli Yavne v'chachameh. What was Yavne, if not essentially trying to put back this oven together? Trying to take this cheres hanishbar and turning it into a full vessel that's productive, that's meaningful, that's useful, that has a significant reality. Using the chayil, using sand, the sands of Yavne, and using little grains of sand that don't seem very significant to put the layers back together. At the end of Maseches Brachas, Chazal called the yeshiva in Yavne Kerem b'Yavne, right? The vineyard of Yavne. The Gemara then the Brachas Samach Gimel describes when they came to the Kerem b'Yavne what they said. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Le. It's funny because literally, why is it called a vineyard? So Rashi says, because the sages were sitting rows in organized rows like a vineyard. Vine after a vine after a vine in rows. On a physical level, if you go to Yavna, there's no vineyards. You can't plant vineyards. There's sand everywhere. You can't make a vineyard there. You plant in the sand and a wind comes and it's gone with the wind. You can't plant there. There's no vineyards there. It's one of the most infertile places imaginable from a geological, from a botanic point of view. But what is true botanically is true spiritually. And yet they created a place called the Vineyard of Yavna. On the sands of Yavna they made a vineyard blossom. And here was the big question. Is it successful? Is this a real oven? Is this a real keli? Is this a vessel that can become impure because it's a true vessel? It's not just a broken piece. Rebbe Lezer said it's not. It's not a real vessel. The Chacham said it is a real vessel. What are the bases of civilization? What makes a civilization civilized? You say here is a civilization that's successful. What is civilization? How do you answer that question? Civilization requires three things, three levels. The carob tree, the aqueduct of water, and the walls of the Beis HaMedrash. The first basic element of civilization is that which is naturally there for the taking. Imagine the old hunters, the old foragers, gatherers. They just live by what is. So you have carobs growing, that's a source of nutrients. If you have grapes growing, noch besser. The first layer that makes civilization is we rely and we're nurtured and we're sustained by that which exists due to nature. That's the carob tree. There's the second layer to civilization. We come and we use our brains and we build tools to advance our life quality, to lengthen our lifespan, to give us more of the resources that we would like to make and to have. We build hammers, we build knives, we build swords, we build canals, we build aqueducts. I need more water, so I channel the water. This is the exploitive the success of the human brain to advance civilization. And it's a higher state. I'm not just relying like the gorilla, or the reptile, or the other mammal, or the rodent, or the reptile, the fish, or the bird, or the mammal, on what is, but human brain develops tools to further what is. And then civilization reaches yet a deeper level. And that is when I can take what is, and I can take my tools, and I can begin to fashion institutions that become places in which my dreams are facilitated, our values, our priorities. Those are the basics of community, of civilization. Rabbi Eliezer comes and says, look at the Jewish people and you'll see, none of this exists anymore. The carob tree has been uprooted. The aqueduct of water is going in the opposite direction. The walls of the Beis Medrash, when humanity comes together to build ideas, dreams, institutions, homes, families, communities, yeshivas, libraries, centers of academia, of learning, of study, it's all gone. We don't have our natural resources. We don't have independence. We don't have creativity. Yes, the oven was put together with sand, but it's not a real oven. It's a cheres hanishbar, and therefore, halachically also, it's not susceptible to tumah, because something that's broken can't become impure, because there's nothing to impurify. It's just broken. It doesn't have value. For something to become impure, it has to have value. The sages disagreed. Rabbi Eliezer says, ask God. Min hashamayim yechichu. Let's hear what God says. And a voice says, of course Rabbi Eliezer is right. Of course Rabbi Eliezer is right. When you're looking at history, it's obvious that, we're trying to make some replacements, we're trying to get another couple of years, we're trying to do some nice things, but fundamentally, this civilization, sadly and tragically, has come to an end. This is what the laws of nature dictate. And it's at such a moment that we can appreciate. It's at this moment we can appreciate what happens. Rabbi Yehoshua stands up and he says, first of all, I'm not impressed with the Carib. I'm not impressed by the water. I'm not impressed by the walls. And then he looks at heaven and he says, Torah loy b'shamayim he. I want to tell you something. We are creating a new type of civilization. We are creating a new type of reality. We are revolutionizing history. I know heaven has its plan of what civilization looks like, but we have created a lifeboat. As the Titanic of Jewish history perhaps has sunk, we created a lifeboat. Achrei rabim lahatois. We created a real oven. Yes, it's made of grains of sand. Yet it's held together by something that seems so mortal and frail and weak. But I want to tell you that there's real life here. This is a real oven. This is a real keli. This is of real value. This is of real significance. Don't think that the Jewish people and Judaism have come to an end. Because what's happening in Yavne is that even from a physical point of view, we have nothing. There's no epicenter. There's no land to call ours. We're being persecuted. We're being harassed. We have suffered terribly. We're left literally without leadership, without an infrastructure, physical and spiritual. Nonetheless, in Yavne, we are creating something. What are we creating? It's here that we can go back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and understand what he meant when he said, Ten li Yavne v'chachameh. What was he asking for? Vespasian said yes. Why? Aspasianus was the Roman emperor. He asked himself, what is this old Jew asking for? Basically, sand. He's asking for something that's meaningless. Why shouldn't I give him Yavne? Well, we're going to have a little shtibel there with a couple of people sitting with a few texts and arguing with each other? Who cares? Let him have it. What do I care? What was Vespasian really doing? He was really signing his own death certificate. He was signing Rome's death certificate. He couldn't know it. Isn't that the metaphor of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai going out of Jerusalem, feigning himself to be a dead man? When you look at the coffin, what do you see? A dead man. What was really inside? A living person. When Vespasian gives Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Yavne, what was he giving him? In his mind, he was giving him a coffin. He was giving him sand, something infertile, something non-substantial. So they're going to sit in the houses of Yavne and discuss Zroyim, Moyed, Noshim, Nezikin, Kotchim, Taras. They're going to immerse themselves in the laws of Peah, or Shviyis, or Kelayim, or Chala, or Bikurim, or Lechi, or Erevin, or Koira. The laws of Yom Kippur, the laws of Zvachim, Chulin, Erkin, Tmura, Krisus, the laws of Alois, Tumas oil, the laws of Tumas Kalim, the laws of Tanar Achnoi, the laws of Tumas Paraduma, the laws of Tumas Uktzin. That doesn't count for anything. That's meaningless. Let them do it. Let them train students that way. Rome is the future. Vespasian was very logical. Ten li Yavne v'chachameh. I'm giving him sand. I'm giving him a coffin. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, of course, understood what Vespasian couldn't understand. And that is, the Jewish people, without bringing the sheep every morning and every afternoon to the Beis HaMikdash to offer it, they may survive, they may not survive. But if they stop learning about the two sheep, if they don't learn anymore Zvachim and Achas Chulin, Hilchas Karbonis, Hilchas Karbon Tmidin and Musafin, laws of Chagiga and the laws of Shgogas, the laws of Yerushalayim and the laws of Trumas and Maestras, the laws of the Beis HaMikdash and the laws of Kotshi Kalim and Kotshim Kadoshim and Pigul and Noiser and the laws of Koyanim, if they don't learn it, for sure they won't be able to survive. Moments before his death, he started to cry. He said, I don't know, am I going to Gan Eden? Am I going to Gehenna? Before a person passes, they say, their whole life flashes by before them in a few moments. And sometimes you've lived a good life, very good life. And you did amazing things. But sometimes there's one moment in a person's life, and you don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive yourself for that moment. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived an incredible life, but there was one moment he questioned. That moment when he stood in front of the most powerful person in the world, and the man said, tell me what you want and I'll grant it to you. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for 3 things. But now, moments before he left his soul, moments before he left his body, he asked himself one question. Did I fail my people? Did I betray my people? Am I ultimately guilty for the state of the Jewish people today? Because had I had the courage, had I had the audacity, had I had the guts, I would look him in the eyes and impress upon him to spare us the Beis HaMikdash. Because of me, indirectly, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Indeed, maybe I will go to Gehenna. Because of me, I am the one who carries the blame, the guilt. And some of you know what Jewish guilt can be like, especially in the women's section. I am the one who carries the Jewish guilt for the destruction of the Jewish people. Of course I will go to Gehenna. And then moments later he said, make a seat for Chizkiah Melech Yehuda. Chizkiah Melech Yehuda in history is the one who watched Sancheriv come and exile 10 tribes of Israel. And they're gone till today. 150 years before the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the 10 tribes were exiled and assimilated, and it's one of the incredible things in Jewish history that in 150 years, the majority of the Jewish people got lost, and we still don't know where they are and who they are, even though every few Sundays another theory emerges. And Chizkiah was next. Sancheriv came to conquer Yehuda. And Shavna told Chizkiah, surrender, there's no hope. Surrender, Sancheriv is the man. Give in, acquiesce. But Chizkiah did not. And that famous plague that killed 180,000 troops of Sancheriv the first night of Pesach, as the Tanakh records, saved Yerushalayim. Physically saved Yerushalayim. And now it was Chizkiah from all people who came back to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and said, I'm here to escort you. Rabbi Yochanan, you're not guilty for the destruction of Yerushalayim. You're the one who was responsible ultimately for saving Yerushalayim. Because as long as those sands of Yavna will be put into that oven of Knesset Yisrael, that oven will remain vibrant, alive in its dreams, in its memories, in its love, in its passion, in its faith, in its Torah, and in its mitzvahs. Nothing will vanquish it and destroy it. But Rabbi Yochanan asked for another 2 things. He asked for a doctor for Reb Tzadok and the chain of Reb Gamliel. Because he understood Yavna is powerful. It's powerful in a way that Vespasian will not notice its power. But for the lifeboat to survive, and for the lifeboat to be able to carry the people through a turbulent sea until they can come to their destination, they have to remember very clearly where they come from. So we had the dynasty of Reb Gamliel, which reminds them about their leaders and their kings all the way back to David HaMelech and Yehuda. And gets the doctor for Reb Tzadok, because people who cry for something 40 years don't forget it so fast. Reb Tzadok and his prayers won't allow them to forget a Beis HaMikdash and a Yerushalayim. With Reb Gamliel's dynasty alive, and Reb Tzadok amongst them, this is not just a substitute for the old. This is a continuum of the old through Yavna v'Chachameh. So Chizkiah comes there and says, you didn't sacrifice Yerushalayim, you saved Yerushalayim. You, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. No, Gehenna is not your place. Gan Eden is your place. Because if 2,000 years later, 6.7 million Jews today, Ken Yirbu, live in Eretz Yisrael and speak the language they spoke during the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I assume if anybody from present-day Iran meet somebody from the Persian Empire who lived 2,400 years ago. And you put them together in a room, somebody from today's Iran and somebody from the Persian Empire of Cyrus. And you put them together in a room. Unless they both have iPhones, and one of them don't, because 2,500 years ago they didn't have it, if I'm not mistaken. They won't have anything to talk about. And you put somebody today from Egypt with somebody from the ancient Egyptian Empire from 3,500 years ago, I don't know if they'll have anything to talk about. But you take any Jew, you put him in one room with a Jew who lived 2,000 years ago, they'll have 100 things to argue about, including the Tanur Achnai, especially if both of them learned Mishnayos. If after 2,000 years, millions of Jews can live today in Eretz Yisrael and live as Jews in Eretz Yisrael, on different levels and different categories with all the debates, how did it happen? It only happened because in Yavne, they never stopped talking about Kedushas Mechitzas, and Kedushas Harabayis, and Noiser, and Shmiras HaKoyanim, and Lishmoi v'Lishma, and Halachas of Karbonis, and Zrikas Hadam, Lamaila, and Lamata, and Chut HaSikra, and Chata Shenishchat Lishmoi, or Shaloi Lishmoi, Limnuyav, Shaloi Limnuyav, the Pesach. The reality of the Beis HaMikdash of Yerushalayim remained so vibrant in Jewish words, in Jewish life. A Jew came home from a hard day of work in Poland, in Galicia, in Hungary, in Ukraine, in Lithuania, in Russia, in Western Europe, and opened up a Chumash or a Mishnayos or any other Sefer of Torah, Gemara, and suddenly he or she was spiritually in Yavne, which means they were spiritually in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash. Civilization wasn't over. It lived, but it lived in a different way. They didn't have sovereignty, they didn't have an army, they didn't have a country, but it lived in words, and it lived in ideas, and it lived in passion, and it lived in prayer, and it lived in learning, and it lived in actions, and it lived in mitzvahs, and it lived in rituals, and it lived in yeshivas, and it lived in education. So Reb Nosson meets Eliyahu Hanavi, and he says, what did Hashem do when Rabbi Yeshua disagreed with the heavenly voice? He said, Hashem started to laugh and said, Nitzchuni bonai, Nitzchuni bonai. My children were victorious over me. My children were victorious over me. They created something to take such a dark moment and transform it into a catalyst and a springboard for eternity. This is something absolutely unique. There's a trajectory of how history works. Their civilization came to an end. But when they stood up and said, Loi b'shamayim hi, we are going to recreate everything on the sands of Yavne, and the oven will continue to pulsate heat, life, warmth, and passion. It won't be a cheres hanishbar. It will be Adam, Adame le'Elyoy, not only Adam min Adama. Nitzchuni bonai. Maritzchiyu says in the Gemara, the word nitzchuni doesn't only mean victory, it comes from the word eternity. Netzach. Nitzchius. Like you say Netzach, Selavod, the Gemara says in Erevin means eternal. Kol mokem shenemar by Netzach, Selavod, en le hefsek. The word Netzach, la'ad u'lenetzach netzachim, we say in the Kedusha. For eternity. Nitzchuni, bonai nitzchuni, says the Maritzchius. They took the Torah, they took me, and they turned me into something eternal, into something nitzchiyisdik. Why? Without that moment, any charlatan in history, and there have been many, came up and declared that they heard voices from heaven, and maybe they did, or they showed miracles, fictional or reality, to prove that you have to uproot Torah. But at that moment, nitzchuni, says the Maritzchius. They turned the Torah into something nitzchiyusdik. They turned me into netzach, eternity. Nothing can vanquish it. Nothing can eliminate it. Nothing can destroy it. Nothing can compromise it. Over thousands of years, the immune system of Yiddishkeit is so powerful. Why? Nitzchuni bonai. From the Loi b'shamayim hi. Loi b'shamayim hi meant the Rebbeinu Shalom through Moshe gave a mechanism. How you know what is Torah, what is not Torah. It follows that mechanism that's articulated in Torah, Loi b'shamayim achrei rabim lahatois. And in that way, its eternity is guaranteed. And thus the eternity of the Jewish people is guaranteed. Because b'hatalia, one depends on the other. So nitzchuni, bonai nitzchuni, they made me eternal. They made Torah eternal, and in that process, they also make themselves eternal. Nitzchuni, bonai nitzchuni. And I would just add, maybe on a spiritual, mystical note, the debate has profound ramifications for human beings in that generation and in all generations, including today's generations. There was a writer who once said, life breaks all people. Okay, not all, many. And then some people know how to live in broken places better than others. Mashul kecheres hanishbar. Life breaks people. Klei cheres. The oven breaks. What happens? Rabbi Eliezer said, the Gemara says, was mitalmidei Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai shamutiyu, Rabbi Eliezer. He was the students of Beis Shammai. So Tosfos and Shabbos and Beitza. Beis Shammai says in Chagiga, heaven was created before earth. Beis Hillel says earth was created before heaven. Eretz kadmu l'shamayim. Big argument. Rebbe Eliezer followed Beis Shammai, the others followed Beis Hillel. The argument goes back to Medrash Rabbah, Parshas Bereshis Rabbah, Parsha Ches, Amar Reb Simon. Reb Simon said when Hashem wanted to create the world, there was a huge fight. What was the fight? Truth on one side, Chesed on the other side. Kindness said, create the human being. People are kind, at least some. Truth said, don't create the human being because everybody's always lying. Malei shkarim, the human being is full of lies. What did Hashem do? Natal emes v'shlichel aretz. He took earth, he hurled it into the ground. Hadahu d'ksiv emes me'eretz titzmach. Truth grows from the earth. Why is it? Because it's tif bagraben in the erd. It's deep, it's buried deep in the earth. So it has to grow from the earth. Why? Because God took emes and he threw it into the earth. What's the meaning of that? That's a great way of handling a debate, right? You have an opinion, somebody else has another opinion. Why don't you take them and throw them under the earth? Of course I won the debate. What type of explanation is that? There's a powerful explanation of the Balatanya. And he says as follows, there's two versions of truth. There's heavenly truth and there's earthly truth. What happens when you take something and you throw it to the ground? It usually shatters, it breaks into pieces. Take a piece of glass, take a piece of earthenware and throw it hard to the ground, it will shatter into pieces. There's truth of heaven and there's truth on earth. Truth of heaven is uniform. Truth of heaven is absolute. Truth of heaven is holistic. Truth of heaven is objective. And then there's truth on earth. Truth on earth is very, very different. We all have a little piece of it. Nobody has all of it. Together we can recreate it. Truth in heaven is very strong and powerful. Truth on earth is vulnerable. Truth in heaven means truth that's absolute, non-negotiable. Truth on earth is, this is my experience. You may have a different experience. Whose experience is right? If you're married, whose experience is right? If you're single, whose experience is right? Somebody sent me a clip the other day. There was a wise man, and he said to his wife, nothing, because he was a wise man. Truth in heaven can be absolute. Truth on earth is broken. I don't have the full perspective of reality, do you? I don't have the full vision of reality, do you? When I listen to somebody, I don't know everything about them. Do you? We're tempted to think we know, and therefore we judge, we condemn pretty swiftly. But that's sheker. Shin Kuf Reish are all letters that they exist right near each other. Because my vision is so narrow. Emes, Aleph is the beginning, Mem is the middle, Tuf is the end. Because truth needs a full, holistic perspective. Can you see the beginning? Can you see the middle? Can you see the end? If not, be humble. Be very humble. Truth in heaven says, don't create the human being. People lie. By definition, they lie. Natal emes v'shlicha la'aretz. Hashem said you have to appreciate the earth. The earth is truth. Earth truth comes from brokenness. It comes from failure. It comes from stumbling blocks. It comes from taking your brokenness and using it as a springboard for renewal, for tshuva, for healing. It's choil, it's earth. It's mundane. Yes, I'm a cheres hanishbar. And then I take the choil, the earth. I take the stuff from which I was created. And I fill in the gaps. And I try to create an oven out of it. You create a keli. Rabbi Eliezer, Beis Shammai, heaven wins. But says, this is garnished. This is a joke. This is a mockery. There's no value here. It's tameh. Rabbi Eliezer indeed was a soul of heaven. But the sages disagreed. They said, Rabbi Eliezer, for you the world is a heavenly place. Carob trees move. Aqueducts of water move in the opposite direction. Walls tilt and fall. Even heaven speaks on your behalf. But Rabbi Eliezer, Torah Eloi B'Shamayim, the truth that we come to, that we aspire to, is the truth of the human experience. It's the truth of human vulnerability. It's the truth of a human being aspiring sulam mutzav arza v'roishay magia hashamayma through the chayil hamavdil bein kodesh l'chayil. Kodesh is heaven, aloof. Chayil is earth, sand. In Yavne, they created this reality that everybody said was destroyed. How do you call a carob tree in Hebrew? Charuv. What does charuv mean? Destroyed. Churban. Charuv. Rabbi Eliezer said, look at the carob tree and you'll see there was a churban, there was destruction. But the Chachamim said, no. We created something called Yavne. And what are the letters of Yavne? Yiboneh. The opposite of Chruv. Chruv is Churban, and Yavne is Yiboneh. Yiboneh HaMikdosh. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Meheira Yiboneh HaMikdosh. Yiboneh is the same letters like Yavne. Churban is the beginning, the invitation to rebuild. We could rebuild. We rebuild with our sand, but we rebuild. That emes is very powerful. It's very deep. It's very genuine. It means when you wake up in the morning and you feel you're tormented, you're shattered, you're fragmented, you're broken, you look like the carob tree and you can't even stay in one place. Like the carob tree, you're uprooted. The Amas Hamayim, you can't even go in one direction. Now you're going in the opposite direction. You thought you had stability and suddenly your walls are falling on you. They're caving in. And at that moment, you want to surrender to depression. You want to surrender to despair. You want to surrender at least to cynicism, to melancholy. Amad Rabbi Yeshua Raglov. Rabbi Yeshua stands up on his legs. Even the heavenly voices seem to agree with Rabbi Eliezer. The story has come to an end. Amad Rabbi Yeshua v'amar Torah loy b'shamayim ein mashgichin bebaskoil shekvar nitna Torah mehar Sinai. There was a gift given at Har Sinai that the human being, the Adam Elyon Adam Yisoide Me'afar, he or she, in the depth of your own identity, lay chelik elekam imal yofe koyach haben mikoyach ha'av. The Gemara says in Shavuos, the power of the child is sometimes deeper than the power of the father. And as the great masters say, yofe koyach haben is also mikoyach ha'av. That itself comes from the father. And yet it brings out in the father something that the father himself was unaware of. That's this Gemara. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Nitzchuni bonai. Where did they get Torah loy b'shamayim? From Hashem. And yet we bring out Yofek koyach haben. The child brings out something in the father, kivayochel, that the father himself doesn't bring out in a revealed way. The nitzchuni bonai, which is why the month is called not of Menachem, but Menachem of. Of Menachem literally means the father comforts. What does Menachem of mean? You comfort the father. There's something about a child who has the ability to comfort the father, to comfort the mother. God is light. God is Ur. God is eternity. And then God allows the Jewish people to be plunged into a place of brokenness and darkness. There's no light anymore. There's no hope anymore. The era is over. Come the Jewish people, the peace of Hashem that was sent into darkness, and they say, Kachashecha ka'ira. We will show you that transformation is not only capable, but it's the truth. We bring out a deeper truth, Kivayachal in the Rebbeinu Shalom, that transforms the darkness into light, the despair into hope, the eclipse into luminescence, and the night into day. And Hashem says, nitzchuni bonai nitzchuni. And if I think back now, I think you might agree with me that if those people sitting in the Beis Medrash in Yavna, watching the carob tree being uprooted, watching the aqueduct of water flowing in the wrong direction, watching the walls tilt, and hearing a voice that says, Rebbe Lezer is right. If those sages, those few individuals sitting there in the Beis Medrash, 1,920 or 30 years ago, I don't know the exact date, in the vineyard of Yavna, and they would look today at the lifeboat that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai created in Yavna, Yibana, what would they say? That group of people, Chachmei Kerem b'Yavna, would look at the lifeboat today, and I can assure you that just like God was smiling, they too would be quelling, and they would say, nitzchuni, bonai nitzchuni. Almost 2 millennia later, through thick and thin times, with persecutions unprecedented in the annals of human and Jewish history, the Chruv was turned into Yavna. The Jewish people not only survived, but thrive. And despite the perils all around us, and despite the dangers all around us, and despite the doubts, the questions, the dilemmas, the challenges, the fact remains that 2,000 years later, Knesset Yisrael not only lives, but Knesset Yisrael grows, Knesset Yisrael dreams, Knesset Yisrael builds, Knesset Yisrael loves, Knesset Yisrael believes, and Knesset Yisrael is united as ever, with ever-increasing and everlasting strength, deeply connected to Torah, deeply connected to mitzvahs, deeply connected to Yavna, Yerushalayim, and the Beis HaMikdash. Just in a few hours from now, I was given the honor in the Baal Shem Tov's shul not far from here to put in some stones that were brought over last week from the one bunker that they discovered in the Warsaw ghetto. If you ever visit Warsaw now, you'll see the Germans got rid of the ghetto completely. But they discovered a few weeks ago the bunker of Mordechai Anelevitz, who was one of the people who arranged the Warsaw Ghetto uprising in April 1943, the first night of Pesach. In the bunker they found tefillin, just now, and they found other svarim of Torah. A few bricks from that bunker were brought over here to Muncie, together with bricks from shuls in another 15 shuls in Poland that were burned, destroyed, and the entire community massacred. And 3 Holocaust survivors, ages 100, 99, and 101, Larichis Yamav V'Shanim Tovis, are going to put in the stones. And he reminded me, the Maharsha says, it says in Maseches Megillah, Daf Chavtes, Rabbi Yochanan said that all the shuls and the Batei Midrashos of the diaspora are going to be moved over to Eretz Yisrael. So the Maharsha says, and they're all going to be attached to the Beis HaMikdash. They're all going to be extensions of the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. I guess that's why they'll be placed. So those who are worried you're going to lose your seat in shul, and for some Jews that can be a serious thing. So this shul, it's not a problem, because you're anyway losing your seats every few days, because buildings go up, buildings come down, tents go up, tents go down. So you never know what's happening. So it keeps everybody safe. But there are other shuls where you have a seat for 29 years, and dear the Jew who sits down on your seat, especially Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So the Maharsha says, don't worry about it. You're going to have your comfortable seat. It's going to be an extension of the Beis HaMikdash. Let's hope it doesn't go too far in the outskirts of Yerushalayim. So everything will be fine. So as these bricks come over from those places to shuls here in America, those shuls, B'Karav Mamash, will become extensions of the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. Now here is a letter. The founder of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi David Lichtenstein, sent me a letter that he got from a Jew in the Warsaw Ghetto. And he sent it to me. I take a look. I happen to know that Jew very well. His name was Dr. Hillel Zeidman. Hillel Zeidman was an old Yiddish writer. And I knew him. You remember Hillel Zeidman? Olav Hashalom. So he sent me a letter that Zeidman wrote in the ghetto. If I would have the schus to take a few of these bricks and bring them over to Eretz Yisrael. That's what he hoped for in 1940, in the early 40s. He was saved. Most of the Jews of Warsaw were killed. I think he has a son who lives here in Muncie, actually. He's here? Huh? Shma Milsahu. Okay. What do you have to ruin it for? MS. MS. Very good. Thank you for listening. So these bricks are coming over now. But bricks are bricks. They're significant. But it represents something very powerful. It represents that which is made from the chol, from the sand, that which is made from mortar, that which is made from mud, that which is made from earth. The Jewish people managed to hold it alive and to resurrect it and to make sure that eternity is guaranteed until the great moment when the Sanhedrin and Yavne and Usha and Tveria and Sipori and all the 10 places that goes to Sanhedrin, and the lifeboat will be restored to the real source of sustenance, to the ultimate place of Knesset Yisrael and Klal Yisrael. B'bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, b'mheira b'yameinu, Amen. Thank you. Thank you for coming.